Picture the morning the lights don't come back on. Not for an hour, not for a day, for good. The stores are stripped bare in 48 hours. The gas stations have plywood over the pumps. And the gold coins you've been hoarding? Nobody wants them. You can't eat gold. You can't burn it for heat. You can't trade a shiny coin for the one thing your family actually needs. But there are 11 things that will be worth more than gold when that day comes. And every single one of them is sitting in an Amish workshop right now, being made by hand, the same way it was made 200 years ago. I learned this the hard way. I spent decades trusting the system, paying every bill, believing somebody would always flip the switch and keep me comfortable. Then I spent real time in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and Holmes County, Ohio. And what I saw in those workshops changed how I think about wealth completely, because the Amish never stopped making the things the rest of us forgot how to make. Stay with me, because the 11th item on this list is the one almost nobody talks about. I found it referenced in a United States Department of Agriculture bulletin from 1902, and the people who own one will be sitting on something their neighbors would trade a month of food for. And no, you don't need to build a homestead from scratch to use any of this. Most of it fits in the home you already own. Let me start with the one I underestimated the most. Salt. I know how that sounds. Salt is the cheapest thing in your grocery store. A big container costs less than a cup of coffee. So how could it ever be worth more than gold? Here's what most people never learned. For most of human history, salt was money. The word salary comes from the Latin word for salt, because Roman soldiers were partly paid in it, whole cities were built on salt routes, wars were fought over it, and the reason is simple. Without salt, you cannot preserve meat. You cannot keep food through a winter. You cannot survive. Now walk into an Amish home in late fall. You'll smell it before you see it. Hams hanging in the smokehouse, crocks of cured pork, barrels of salted fish and vegetables packed in brine. No refrigerator humming in the corner, no freezer that turns into a tomb of rotten meat the moment the power dies. They preserve everything with salt the way their great-grandparents did. The first time I watched an older Amish man near Millersburg pack a whole hog into a salt cure, I asked him how long it would keep. He looked at me like I'd asked a strange question. He said, as long as we need it to, that's the difference. So here's what I do, and what you can do this weekend. Buy plain salt, not the fancy stuff, pure sodium chloride, the kind sold for canning and curing. Store it dry, in sealed buckets, away from moisture. It never expires. It never goes bad. 100 years from now, it'll still cure a ham, but salt alone won't keep you alive. Because there's a second item the Amish treat as more precious than almost anything, and most preppers forget it completely. Lard. Now, stay with me, because therefore this matters more than you think. We've been told for 50 years that animal fat is the enemy. That whole campaign started in the 1960s and 70s, and there's a real story there about who funded it that I'll come back to. But the Amish never stopped rendering lard. And in a collapse, fat is one of the most valuable things on earth. Here's why. Calories become survival. Your body burns through energy faster when you're chopping wood, hauling water, doing everything by hand. Fat has more than twice the calories per ounce of sugar or protein. A jar of lard is concentrated survival energy that keeps for years without any refrigeration. The Amish render it from their own hogs in big iron kettles. I watched a family do this on a cold November morning. The steam rising off the kettle, the whole yard smelling rich and warm. They poured it into crocks and jars and stored it in the cellar. Properly rendered and stored, lard keeps for a year at room temperature and far longer if it's cold. But it's not just food. Lard is the base for soap, for candles, for waterproofing leather, for greasing tools so they don't rust. One ingredient, a dozen uses, all of them critical when the supply chains are gone. You can render lard yourself in your own kitchen with nothing more than a pot and some pork fat from a local farmer. No special equipment, no homestead required. And the man who knows how to do it will be feeding his family long after the canned goods run out. So we've got salt to preserve, fat to fuel. But what about light when the grid goes dark and the night gets long? That brings me to the third thing, beeswax. When the power dies, the world gets dark in a way most of us have never experienced. No street lights, no lamp you can flip on, just black from sundown to sunrise for 16 hours in the winter. And in that darkness, a candle becomes one of the most valuable things you own. But not just any candle. The cheap candles at the store are made from paraffin, which is a petroleum product. When the oil supply chain breaks, paraffin disappears. Beeswax doesn't. Beeswax comes from bees, and the Amish keep bees. Here's something most people never learned. Beeswax candles burn cleaner, brighter, and far longer than paraffin. They don't fill your house with black soot. And beeswax has a shelf life of essentially forever. Archaeologists have found beeswax in Egyptian tombs, thousands of years old, still usable. In the Amish communities I visited, beeswax was everywhere. Candles, yes. But also as a sealant for jars, a waterproof coating for thread and canvas, a polish for wood and leather, a balm for cracked hands in winter. The man with beehives in a collapse isn't just making honey, which itself never spoils. He's producing light. He's producing medicine. He's producing a trade good people will line up for. Now, you might be thinking you can't keep bees in your backyard, but beeswax stores forever. You can buy blocks of pure beeswax right now and stack them in a closet. The day you need to make a candle, the wax will be waiting. But here's where it starts to get uncomfortable. Because some of these old skills weren't just forgotten by accident. Some of them were pushed aside on purpose by people who profited when we stopped doing things for ourselves. Let me show you what I mean with the fourth item. Raw, untreated wool. We don't think about wool much anymore. We buy a synthetic jacket made from plastic fibers, and we call it good. But here's what nobody tells you. When that synthetic jacket gets wet, it stops keeping you warm. And when it wears out, you throw it in a landfill where it sits for 500 years. Wool is different. Wool keeps you warm even when it's wet. That's not a marketing claim. That's physics. The crimped fibers trap air and hold heat, and the natural lanolin in the wool repels water. Sailors and mountain men relied on wool for centuries because it was the only thing that kept them alive in cold, wet conditions. The Amish raise sheep. They shear the wool, they card it, spin it, and weave it into blankets and clothing that last decades. I held a wool blanket in a home near Lancaster that the woman told me her grandmother had made. It was still warm, still strong, still doing its job after 60 years. Now think about the petroleum and chemical companies that make synthetic fabric. Every wool blanket your grandmother made is a blanket they didn't sell you. There was a real shift in the mid-20th century when manufacturers pushed synthetic fibers hard and quietly framed wool as old-fashioned and difficult. They benefited from your ignorance. They wanted you buying a new plastic coat every few years instead of one wool, one that lasts a lifetime. When the collapse comes, the synthetic coats stop being made. The wool keeps being made by hand the way it always was. And the family with sheep or with stored wool is the family that stays warm. You don't need a flock to start. You can buy raw wool or wool blankets and yarn right now. Store them with a bit of cedar to keep the moths away, and they'll outlast you. But wool keeps you warm. It doesn't keep you fed when your garden fails. And that's exactly the trap the modern world set for us. Which brings me to the fifth thing. Open pollinated heirloom seeds. This is the one that should scare you the most. Here's what almost no one understands about the seeds in modern agriculture. Most commercial crops today are grown from hybrid seeds, and hybrid seeds do not breed true. That means if you save the seeds from your hybrid tomatoes and plant them next year, you get a weak, useless mess. The plant is designed so you cannot reproduce it. You have to go back and buy new seeds every single year. Think about what that means in a collapse. No store, no seed company, no new seeds to buy. The man with a garden full of hybrid plants gets one harvest and then nothing. The Amish never went down that road. They saved seeds. They've been saving the same varieties for generations, open-pollinated seeds that breed true year after year, seeds that have been adapted to their soil and their climate for over 100 years. There's a real history here. The Seed Savers Exchange was founded in 1975 by a couple in Iowa who realized that traditional varieties were disappearing fast. They documented something staggering. We've lost most of the vegetable varieties that existed in this country a century ago. The United States Department of Agriculture kept records back in the early 1900s, hundreds of thousands of apple varieties, thousands of types of vegetables, and the vast majority are simply gone now. Wiped out as industrial agriculture took over, but the Amish and a handful of seed savers kept the old lines alive. A jar of open pollinated seeds in a collapse is a renewable food supply. You plant them, you harvest, you save the seeds, and you plant again, forever. That's not a one-time meal. That's a food machine that runs on its own, season after season. Now, if you already own a house and you're thinking this only applies to people building a farm from scratch, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you. You don't need acreage, you don't need a barn. You can store heirloom seeds in mason jars in your refrigerator or freezer right now, and they'll stay viable for years. You can grow heirloom tomatoes and beans and squash in buckets on a patio or in a small bed in a suburban backyard, and the moment things go bad, you start saving those seeds. No permit, no contractor, no special land. Just the same knowledge the Amish never let go of. The system wanted you dependent on buying seeds every year. The Amish stayed free, and now you can too. But seeds need time to grow. What do you do for the things you can't grow at all? The things you absolutely cannot make yourself? That question leads to the sixth item, and it's one most people walk right past. And that's exactly the kind of knowledge that fills the pages of what I've put together for you. I spent years pulling these methods directly from Amish pantries, old farm records, and first-hand conversations in Lancaster and Holmes County, and I organized all of it into a complete system called the Amish Pantry Blueprint and the Amish Stockpile Blueprint, both included in the Complete Amish Resilience Field Edition. It's a single practical reference you can hold in your hands, covering everything from curing and rendering to seed saving and herbal medicine, written so anyone can use it starting today. The link is in the description if you want to go deeper than this video can take you, but let's keep moving because the next items on this list get even more surprising. Hand tools. Real ones. Forged steel, wooden handles, tools with no batteries, no cords, no electronics, no plastic parts that crack the first cold morning. We live in a world of power tools, and power tools are wonderful until the power's gone. Then they're just heavy paperweights. The cordless drill with a dead battery you can't recharge. The electric saw that does nothing. Walk into an Amish workshop and you'll see a different world. Hand planes, braces, and bits. Crosscut saws, augers, draw knives, tools that have been used every day for 50 years and will be used for 50 more. The Amish build entire barns, beautiful, massive structures with hand tools and muscle, no electricity at all. I stood in a shop near Berlin, Ohio, and watched a young man bore a perfect hole through a thick oak beam with a hand auger. No motor, no noise, but the wood. He did it faster than I could have set up an extension cord. Here's the part that matters. They build them to be repaired, not replaced. A wooden handle breaks, you carve a new one. A blade dulls, you sharpen it. These tools are designed to last generations, and they were made before anybody thought of building in the obsolescence that forces you to buy a new one every few years. In a collapse, a good set of hand tools is pure gold. You can build, you can repair, you can make other things. The man with a chest of quality hand tools is the man everyone in the community needs, and you can start collecting them today. Estate sales, flea markets, old barns. The good old steel tools are out there, often cheaper than the plastic junk at the hardware store. Learn to sharpen them, learn to use them, because the skill matters as much as the tool. But tools build things. They don't clean a wound or fight an infection. And when the pharmacies are empty, that becomes the most terrifying gap of all. Which brings us to number 7, herbal medicine and tinctures. This is where the modern person feels the most helpless. We've been trained to believe that health comes only from a pharmacy, that the only real medicine comes in a bottle with a prescription. And when those bottles run out, people panic. But for thousands of years before the pharmaceutical industry existed, people healed with plants. And the Amish never stopped. They grow medicinal herbs in their gardens. They make tinctures, salves, and teas. They know which plant stops bleeding, which one fights infection, which one brings down a fever. There's real science behind this, not just folklore. Researchers at universities have confirmed that many traditional remedies work exactly as the old herbalists claimed. Yarrow really does help stop bleeding. Garlic really does have antibacterial properties. Honey, which the Amish have in abundance, is so effective at fighting infection that hospitals now use medical-grade honey on wounds that won't heal any other way. Think about that. The fanciest modern hospital reaches for honey, the same thing in the Amish pantry. In a collapse, the person who knows how to make a tincture, who has a garden of medicinal herbs, who has jars of dried yarrow and echinacea and a crock of raw honey, that person becomes the closest thing to a doctor for miles around. People will trade anything for that knowledge. And here's the suppressed part. The pharmaceutical industry cannot patent a plant that grows in your backyard. There's no profit in a remedy you can grow for free. So for generations, traditional plant medicine was pushed to the margins, called quackery, treated as something embarrassing and old-fashioned. The committees that decided what counted as real medicine were funded by the very companies that profited from you being dependent on the pharmacy. The Amish ignored all of that. They kept the knowledge alive. You can start a medicinal herb garden in pots on a windowsill. You can buy dried herbs and learn to make simple tinctures with nothing but alcohol in a jar, no prescription, no permission, just knowledge that's been waiting for you the whole time. But even medicine depends on one thing more basic than all of it, something we turn a tap for and never think about. Until it stops, clean water. And specifically, the 8th item, gravity-fed water filters and the means to store water. Here's a fact that should make you uncomfortable. The average American home depends entirely on an electric pump somewhere to deliver water. When the power dies, the water often dies with it, and the water that does flow may not be safe to drink. People can survive weeks without food. They die in days without clean water. The Amish never depended on the electric grid for their water. They use hand pumps, windmills, gravity-fed cisterns that collect rainwater. And they filter and store water using methods that need no electricity at all. There's a beautiful simplicity to it. A windmill near a farmhouse outside New Holland, Pennsylvania, was pumping water the day I visited, turning slowly in the breeze, doing the same work it had done for 80 years with no fuel, no power bill, no permission from anyone. The water flowed into a tank, and from the tank, by gravity, into the house. In a collapse, the ability to gather, filter, and store clean water is the difference between life and death. A good gravity-fed ceramic filter can clean thousands of gallons of water with no power whatsoever. The family that has one is drinking safely while their neighbors are getting sick from contaminated water. And you can own this right now in any home, apartment, or house, new or old. A gravity-fed filter sits on your counter. You pour dirty water in the top. Clean water comes out the bottom. No plumbing, no electricity, no permit. Set up rain barrels to catch water off your roof. Store water in food-grade containers in your basement. None of it requires anything but the decision to do it. The system wanted you to believe water only comes from a pipe they control. The Amish know better. Now we're getting to the things that truly become priceless. Because some of these items can't be improvised at all when the moment comes. The 9th one is exactly that. A reliable way to make fire. Flint, steel, and stored matches. We take fire for granted, we click a lighter, we turn a knob on the stove, and there it is. But every one of those depends on a supply chain. The lighter runs out of fuel. The stove needs gas or electricity. And starting a fire from nothing, the way most people imagine they could, is far harder than they think. The Amish always have fire. Wood stoves for heat and cooking, and the simple, time-tested tools to light them, flint and steel, which never runs out of fuel and works when it's soaking wet. Stored matches sealed against moisture. The skill to start a fire in any conditions. Fire is cooking. Fire is warmth. Fire is boiling water to make it safe. Fire is everything. In the coldest part of a collapse, the person who can make fire reliably is the person who survives the winter. A flint and steel kit costs almost nothing and lasts a lifetime. Store waterproof matches. Keep dry tinder. Learn the skill before you need it, because the worst time to learn is the freezing night you're depending on it. But staying warm and fed isn't enough. You also have to keep what you have and trade for what you don't, which leads to number 10, and this one surprises people. A treadle sewing machine and the skill to mend. When the collapse comes, no new clothes are being made, no shipments from overseas. What you have is what you have, and the moment it tears, it's done, unless someone can fix it. The Amish make and mend their own clothing. And many of them use a treadle sewing machine, a machine powered entirely by your foot, rocking a pedal back and forth, no electricity at all. These machines were everywhere in American homes before the 1950s. The Singer Company sold millions of them. Built of cast iron and steel, they were made to last 100 years, and many of them have. I watched an Amish woman near Sugar Creek, Ohio, sew a heavy work shirt on a treadle machine her mother had used. The rhythm of it was almost hypnotic. Foot rocking, needle flying, no cord, no plug, no sound, but the soft clack of the mechanism. She told me she'd repaired clothing on it for 30 years and never replaced a single part. In a collapse, the person who can sew and mend turns rags back into clothing, patches the torn coat, makes new garments from old fabric. That's not a hobby. That's a trade everyone will need. You can find these treadle machines at estate sales and auctions, often for very little, because most people don't know what they're worth. Buy one. Learn to use it. Store needles and thread and fabric. You'll be holding a skill that, when the lights go out, is worth more than a closet full of store-bought clothes. And now we come to the 11th item, the one I promised you at the start, the one I found buried in that United States Department of Agriculture bulletin from 1902, the one almost nobody on the prepping channels ever mentions, hardwood ash and the lost art of making lye. I know, it sounds like nothing. Ash from your fire, the stuff you sweep out and throw away. But let me tell you what the old-timers knew and what that 1902 bulletin laid out in plain detail. When you soak hardwood ashes in water, you get lye. And lye is one of the most useful substances in a self-sufficient world. Lye is what turns fat into soap. Without soap, disease spreads, wounds get infected, and people die from things that are entirely preventable. The link between soap, cleanliness, and survival is one of the most important discoveries in human history. But it goes further. Lye is what the old folks used to preserve and treat food. It's how you turn dried corn into hominy, which unlocks nutrients the body can't otherwise absorb. The Native Americans knew this, the early settlers learned it, and the Amish never forgot it. Here's the hero's journey of this knowledge. For thousands of years, every household made its own soap from ashes and fat. It cost nothing. It came from waste. Then the commercial soap industry rose up in the late 1800s and early 1900s, and it was in their interest for you to forget how simple it really was. They wanted you buying a bar every week instead of making your own for free. The knowledge faded from the cities first, then almost everywhere. It survived in the old farm manuals, in that USDA bulletin, and in the daily practice of communities like the Amish who simply kept doing it. Here's how it works, and you can do this. You take ashes from a hardwood fire, oak or maple or hickory, not pine. You put them in a barrel or bucket with holes and a layer of straw at the bottom. You pour rainwater through slowly, and what drips out is lye water. The old test was to float an egg in it. If the egg floats with a spot the size of a quarter showing above the water, the lye is the right strength. That simple egg test is written right there in the old records, passed hand to hand for 200 years. Then you combine that lye with your rendered lard, the very fat we talked about at the beginning, and you have soap. Two things most people throw away. Ashes and fat become one of the most valuable trade goods in a world with no stores. Think about how it all connects. The fire gives you ash. The hog gives you lard. The ash and the lard give you soap and clean food. Nothing wasted, everything useful. A closed loop that needs no factory, no supply chain, no power grid, and no permission from anyone. That's the secret the Amish carry. Not one product, a whole web of knowledge where everything feeds everything else. Salt and fat preserve the food. Seeds grow it. Tools build the shelter. Wool and fire keep you warm. Water and herbs and soap keep you alive. The sewing machine keeps you clothed. And the ash, the thing everyone throws away, ties it all together. When the collapse comes, gold will sit in a drawer, shiny and useless. But the person who knows these 11 things will be the richest person in the county, not because of what they own, because of what they can do. That's the thing they took from us. Not gold. Capability, the simple human ability to make what we need with our own hands from what's around us. We traded it away for convenience, one bill at a time, until we forgot we ever had it. The Amish just never made that trade. If you're the kind of person who believes real knowledge has been quietly pushed aside to protect someone else's profit, then you already know what to do next. So tell me this in the comments. Of these 11 things, which one were you most surprised by? Was it the lye from wood ash, the treadle sewing machine, or the salt that built and broke empires? I read every comment, and I want to know which one hit you the hardest. Leave it below. Don't just think it, write it down, because the people in these comments are building something together. And if you want to keep recovering what was taken from us, the skills the factories and the utility companies were glad to see us forget, then join the rest of us here. This isn't about a channel. It's about a whole community of people putting the old knowledge back together piece by piece. Because in my next one, I'm going to show you the Amish method for keeping food cold all summer long with no electricity, no ice delivery, and no refrigerator. It's a structure they've been building for 200 years, and there's one detail about how they dig it that the modern world got completely wrong. You won't want to miss that one. Until then, start with one item from this list. Just one. Get the salt, buy the seeds, find the old tools, take back one piece of what was yours all along. Because the best time to learn these things was 100 years ago. The second best time is right now, while the lights are still on